The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
Bobby Webster is the GM of the Raptors for the long term.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast.
We are going to talk about the Bobby Webster news from the Toronto Raptors. Let's start with the press conference release, shall we? I'm not going to read the whole thing because that's not interesting, but it's in my inbox here from the team. Keith Pelly leading off here with the announcement that after an extensive search process, the team has decided that they will not appoint a president at this time, but they have further extended the contract of general manager Bobby Webster, who, of course, when Masai Ujiri got let go, it was reported that they had just extended his contract. So what are the details of that? I don't quite know, but an interesting order of operations here for MLSE and Keith Pelly over the last couple of months, where start of June, it seems like they made their decision. We're moving on from Masai Ujiri. Masai pleads his case to stick around through the draft. They say, okay, that's not weird at all. And then they fire him the day after the draft and then say everyone else has been extended. They say they fired Masai Ujiri for basketball reasons. We'll get into why that holds even less water now than it ever has. But ultimately, Bobby Webster is going to be guiding this team. He has seemingly the lead basketball decision-making title for the team. Where I think it's maybe not so cut and dry is that they have not hired this president. And look, the president is the insulation for the GM a lot of the time. That's what Masai Ujiri very much was, I think, over these last 5-6 years since I guess it's been 8 years now since Bobby Webster took over in 2017 after Jeff Weltman left for the Orlando Magic. It's been a long time that Bobby has been the GM of the team, and he will continue to be that. He doesn't have Masai Ujiri as the hammer on decisions. We'll get into sort of the muddiness of trying to parse blame and assign credit and attribution to moves, good and bad, over the last few years between Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster. Certainly, there will be a little more clear now as to who has final decision-making say on the basketball side of things. But again, I don't even think it's that clear because there's no president. There is not that sort of figurehead of the franchise to be the buffer between the owner of the team, or in this case with the Raptors, the collection of dudes who govern the team in suits in MLSE boardrooms, and the rest of the basketball operation. Masai was that buffer. That is now gone. This is the same thing that happened with the Toronto Maple Leafs. When Brendan Shanahan was let go at the end of this past season, they decided not to hire a new president. Effectively, it feels like Keith Pelly is the president of all of these teams. Who knows what's going on with the Blue Jays? We'll talk about them and their sort of the reason why that they might give you some optimism if you're afraid of Rodgers taking over full control. We'll talk about that coming up in a sec here. But effectively, this feels like Keith Pelly is now the guy who has the sort of final say-so over things. And do I think he's going to be in the draft room on draft night saying, take that guy? No. Do I think he's going to be someone who is in Bobby Webster's ears saying, go trade for that guy right now? Probably not. It seemed like maybe Masai Ujiri did have that kind of relationship with the basketball decision-making. Maybe that's a bad thing. Again, we will get into the muddiness of trying to figure out exactly who to blame for the things that have gone wrong in recent years. But now I do think that without that sort of figurehead decision-maker up at the top, with Bobby Webster having that direct line to Keith Pelly, his direct superior now, it seems, there is now ostensibly at the top of the decision-making tree for the Toronto Raptors franchise, a non-basketball person, which is, to me, concerning. I think this all further hammers home that the firing of Masai Ujiri didn't really have anything to do with basketball as much as they wanted to say that it did. It very clearly was the logical endpoint of a simmering long feud between Ed Rodgers and Masai Ujiri, and the recent spell of poor play for the team and the nearing of the end of Masai Ujiri's contract certainly gave the Raptors all the reason in the world to say, hey, this is the time to get Masai out of here and not pay him $15 million to run the team. I would imagine Bobby Webster is not making $15 million to run the team. I imagine they would have had to throw around that kind of money if they wanted to lure, say, Kevin Pritchard from the Pacers or get Bob Myers back in the executive chair as he, collects a cushy paycheck from ESPN right now. It feels like, those would have been the sort of greater investments in terms of money to bring in a chief decision maker. I'm not saying that this is just like a purely cheap move by the Raptors. You can have a totally functioning decision-making tree that's unencumbered by the Keith Pellys and Ed Rogers and Tony Staffieris of the world just fine if you just let the basketball people do basketball things. But there is that lack of a buffer now, that lack of insulation that once existed with Masai Ujiri. Because guess what? Keith Pelly or Ed Rogers was not telling Masai Ujiri how to run his basketball team. That was never going to happen. And hey, maybe Bobby Webster has the exact same sort of bulletproof nature. He says, no, you think this is a thing we should do? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do the thing I think is smart. Like, that could totally be what works out here. But there is no longer that layer of insulation between the GM of the basketball team and the suits in the boardroom up above who control where all the money goes and decide everything. So there's that. I will say, I do in fact think if they were going to go this route and not hire a president, keeping Bobby in charge is the right thing to do. We'll get into why that is. I'm glad they did not go and do some other things that would have really made me question this whole non-basketball people at the top of the decision-making tree thing. Had they brought in Dwayne Casey, big red flag to me. Had they brought in Mark Eversley, the GM of the Chicago Bulls, yes, those Chicago Bulls who are as haplessly run as any franchise in basketball right now. Dwayne Casey, obviously, storied career as the coach of the Raptors, is kind of just like a guy in the front office of the Pistons who got moved up when he got let go from being the coach. Doesn't seem to have a whole lot of sway there based on just sort of what you look into as far as what his title is. He's just like a consultant, essentially, and is, again, a coach by trade. I'm not sure jumping up to president of basketball operations would have been the move there. Had those guys been the hires, then 100% for sure, I'm sitting here really questioning the whole Rodgers of it all. Did they just hire PR-facing yes men to take over the team? Did they make these moves just because it's like, hey, these guys, right? You like them. We fired Masai, but that's okay. We replaced them with guys you like and know. Mark Eversley, of course, being Canadian. Dwayne Casey, of course, being Dwayne Casey. Those were not the moves. And so that's a good start for the Keith Pelly MLSE era of being the captain now when it comes to the Toronto Raptors. We'll see where it goes. I ultimately think this is just like much ado about nothing. They had a massive search for 6 weeks or longer than that. And they, was it 8 weeks now? Basically, they've been on the search. They did all of this sort of hoopla to try to find that new replacement. All the reporting about Bob Myers or Kevin Pritchard as guys they were interested in. And ultimately, it's just, we're not going to hire a president, even though we said we would. And Bobby Webster, you're just the GM still. Again, we'll get into why I like the decision to just keep Bobby where he is, the stuff in favor of that call. But ultimately, just like, again, if you just go through like the decision tree here of decide you want to fire Masai at a certain time, keep him on longer than maybe is normal and kind of have a weird vibe with a guy everyone knows is on the way out. Everyone else looking for extensions and some security for the future. You fire him the day after the draft. Again, a very normal time to fire somebody. And then you go on this extensive search. Apparently, you hire an outside firm to do the search for you. And ultimately, you land on, we're just not going to replace him. And we'll just have Bobby Webster extended further upon what we already gave him. Like, weird stuff. Strange decision-making. Not exactly inspiring. Again, had they thrown a bunch of money at Kevin Pritchard or Bob Myers to come in, you can have your misgivings about Bob Myers as an exec. The two timelines thing didn't quite work out in Golden State. Maybe he was just the lucky benefactor of a generational player ending up on his team and a once-in-a-generation cap spike landing Kevin Durant on his roster. But there's no doubt about it. If you bring in Bob Myers, like, you're paying that guy to be your lead decision maker, to keep the suits completely out of the decision-making tree. They didn't do that. And so this is just a sort of weird, murky middle ground that I think just kind of leaves everyone scratching their heads a little bit. Even again, I think the sort of universal acclaim for Bobby Webster is fair. And I think, again, the right basketball decision, if this was the way they were going to go, has been made. I just don't know if this was the way that everyone thought this was going to go, considering, again, they said out loud, we're going to hire a president. And now we are here 8 weeks later and they are not hiring a president.
Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, on drinks, on merch, on a bigger group if you want. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer it gets to first pitch. And they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worrying out of buying. Gametime has last-minute tickets and zone deals for big savings like 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA Club World Cup matches. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, the lowest price, guaranteed.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Now joining the show, Philip Rossman-Reich does a great job for us at Locked On covering the Orlando Magic, who I think it's fair to say made one of the bigger splashes this offseason in acquiring Desmond Bane from the Memphis Grizzlies. They are a team that was a playoff team a couple years ago, as you probably know, having lost to the Cavs in 7 games in the first round, had a lot of injuries that set them back last year, but still put up, I thought, a pretty noble fight in the first round after getting through the play-in last year, losing to the Boston Celtics. And now the Magic might be a team that is poised to climb up the Eastern Conference standings. So as we get into that, Philip, what's been going on in Orlando this summer, man?
It has been ridiculously hot. That's the big news. Epic Universe opened. I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but we got a new theme park and it's very, very good. That's the big news in Orlando.
Well, I'm glad that it's been very hot. It's been similar. It feels like Northeast Ohio has turned into Florida because it's rained almost every day and been incredibly humid. But yeah, so I totally get that. We don't have new theme parks though. Cedar Point has a few new rides, which I've not been to, but I hear are tall and fast and can be scary if you're into that sort of thing. But so the Magic acquired Desmond Bane, as I mentioned, which I think is probably fair to say was the splashiest move in the Eastern Conference. I think Miles Turner going to Milwaukee probably raised a few more eyebrows just because it's like, oh, the Pacers are losing him and the Bucks are doing what to get him. But how do you think that adding Desmond Bane to Orlando makes things different and I would assume better offensively for the Magic?
Yeah, it's just adding another quality shooter because the Magic, thought they were adding one last year and didn't really work out. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope ended up shooting 34% from 3 and was a non-factor in the playoffs. And, I wasn't necessarily like a bad culture fit. Like his defense was still solid, just didn't mesh well with the offense. And like the injuries probably had something to do with it, but he wasn't with all the injuries and everything that happened with the team last year. He wasn't the player that they needed. So I think Orlando looked at their roster and said, we need more guys who can hit open shots. Because if we're going to get open shots, and they were like middle of the pack in creating open shots, but if we're going to create open shots, we can't be the worst shooting team of the last decade, which they were last year. They were essentially the worst, like one of the 2 worst shooting teams of the last 10 years in the NBA. My favorite stat is they went 27-10 when they shot just 33% from 3. But like 33% is still the worst 3-point shooting in the league last year. So like they didn't need much, but they were like, we not only need another 3-point shooter, we need a volume 3-point shooter, someone who's going to get a bunch up and someone who's going to be able to give us something else offensively, be able to attack a little bit and kind of fit this amorphous, everybody does everything kind of offense that the Magic are trying to run. So, we looked at, if you looked at some of the options, if you go back and listen to like our Locked On mock draft, I made a trade for Anthony Simons. We thought they'd go kind of risk some of their defense to get that kind of a shooter and scorer. They ended up going after a guy that is committed to defense. Like Desmond Bane may not be an all defensive team player, but he isn't going to take away from your defense. And so it felt like not only a move that addressed such a key offensive need for the Magic, but someone who fit their culture really, really well. And that's, I think, why so many people are so in on this Magic team heading into the season.
I certainly think that they're a more talented team. Now, the one big question that I still have that I'm not sure that the Bane acquisition really solves is the perimeter creation. Like they have, I think, a lot of guys that can score because I think Paolo Banchero is a terrific scorer. I think the fact that he gets to the free throw line as often as he does is one of the best skills you can possibly have in the league. I think Desmond Bane is very good. I think Franz Wagner will have a better season than what he has. And if he can return to being able to be like an NBA caliber shooter, I think that'd be really good for the Magic too. But I look at them as a team that almost still, I think, needs the straw that still stirs the drink? Do they have somebody, and maybe they're counting on Anthony Black to really develop quickly and take over that role? I know that they have Tyus Jones. I think that the idea of Tyus is probably a little bit better than the actuality of Tyus, but where do you come out on all that stuff?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily call it the straw that stirs the drink, because I think, like the whole Reggie Jackson thing kind of insists on having like that star player, and like Paolo is that star. Like he is the guy that kind of everyone orbits around and everything kind of grows off of him. But I do agree that the biggest thing that could derail the Magic is just that guy that like ties it all together, that connects all the pieces together. Like Paolo Banchero, like the criticism on him is he is this gifted scorer, can get to the line. Like he's a willing passer. It's not like he's a bad passer or anything, but he is still learning how to manage a game, how to be the star. He's, it's just 3 years into his career. It's his 4th year coming up. He's still learning how to kind of be that centerpiece player. And there's always hiccups in that. And he can be an inefficient shooter. Some of that is he just doesn't trust his teammates to make shots, which last year was a very fair assumption. But like Franz Wagner is still coming into his own as a main creator and a star. Jalen Suggs was thought he could be a kind of point guard type player, and he's nominally the point guard again, but he isn't a high assist player. And I think the Magic prefer him in an off-ball role. So I do think the big thing that could derail the Magic is they're essentially playing point guard by committee. Like I've joked with people that they're moneyballing the point guard position between Paolo, Franz, and Desmond Bane. They can get a point guard. They can get a point guard's worth of assists in the aggregate. Like Paolo averaged nearly 5 assists per game last year. Franz is up near 4 assists per game. Desmond Bane's been over 5. Like the passing isn't the problem. It isn't the statistics. It's a point guard does a very specific thing for a team. And like you mentioned, Tyus Jones, he's not going to start, but he'll be in there to like kind of do some of those point guard things. But the Magic really don't have anyone that has that experience of, this is how we manage a game. This is how we calm everybody down. This is how, these intangible things that point guards do. And that could be something that prevents them from being a better offensive team. Like, again, like the Magic should be better on offense. Like, I think this is the year the streak ends. The Magic haven't had an offense outside the bottom 10 in the league since 2012. I think this is the year the streak ends. I thought it was going to be last year too, though. So,
I was going to bring that up. I was going to bring that streak up. So I was talking with somebody earlier today and we brought it up. I don't know if they're going to be a top 10 offense, but I think they're not going to be bottom 10.
Yes. But like eventually they want to win championships. Like they want to be in that conversation. Their payroll certainly suggests they'll be in that conversation, or they should be in that conversation. And to get there, you've got to be a lot better on offense than this Magic team has shown itself able to be consistently. So, I think the point guard question, and that's what it is. It's a point guard question. I think the point guard question is still a big one this team has to answer, but they seem very comfortable with what their plans are for the foreseeable future.
So there are a few more things I want to get to, but I do want to ask a small follow-up question to something you said, because you called it moneyballing the point guard position, which I love. 1, great movie, great pool. But 2, can it really be moneyballing a position when the 3 guys you mentioned are going to combine to make $90 million next year, which is far and away more money than any Oakland Athletics team ever, I think, as a full 26-man roster? Can that really be moneyballing? That's
probably more than the Athletics paid in total salary for like the 3 years that movie is covering. After the 3 years after Jason Giambi left. No, I mean, like that's a fair point, but like the concept is what I'm going after, is like, this is like again, like everybody says the Magic need a point guard. The Magic need a point guard. They need, they need this thing. And it's just like, well, the approach is just going to be like, Paolo, we don't want to take the ball out of Paolo's hands. Like I've said to people, like every team wants Derek White. The Magic need a Derek White type point guard, and maybe Jalen Suggs becomes that. They bring someone who brings the ball up, initiates the offense, and then it kind of goes where it goes. But the Magic are kind of trying, the theory of the Magic's case, so to speak, is that they want everyone who can do everything. Like they want to switch all 5 positions on defense. They want, Paolo Banchero, a 6'10" forward, to be their leading assister. They want Franz to be able to make plays off the dribble. They want, their guards to set picks. They want everyone to do everything. And I think that's kind of the theory of the case. And the Magic are going to have to prove whether that can lead to wins at the level they're looking to win at.
Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, on drinks, on merch, on a bigger group if you want. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer it gets to first pitch. And they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worrying out of buying. Gametime has last minute tickets and zone deals for big savings like 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA Club World Cup matches. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Jared McCain's role in this 76ers upcoming season.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast.
We've talked a lot about Quentin Grimes and Kelly Oubre, and we've talked about VJ Edgecombe. All of a sudden, Jared McCain has become the forgotten man, and if the Sixers are going to make any sort of playoff noise in a season that has been as injury-riddled as previous seasons, McCain has to be one of those guys to step up in a major way on the 76ers roster.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And not only does he have to, step up in a major way in regards to being the forgotten one, he's also, no one's really talking about his injury either. You know what I mean? We're all focused on everyone else, and no one's talking about McCain, like what he's been up to, where he's at, what he's doing. But, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Jared McCain, I don't know if I think he's a starter in this league, right? I don't know if he's a starter on this team long-term with Tyrese Maxey just because of the size that they have, right? Mm-hmm. McCain is listed as 6'2", Maxey's listed as 6'2", and you have other taller guys. However, for the 76ers to be successful, I believe that Jared McCain is going to have to excel in his role, whatever that is, coming off the bench, giving you buckets. Like, you know what? And I know people may look at it like, he might be better than Lou Will, but I think he has to have a Lou Will type of role for the 76ers to be successful. So, yeah, you are 100% correct, man. Like, no one's really talking about him. He's become the forgotten guy. But in order for them to be successful, especially with these injuries, he has to excel.
Yeah, it was like last year, he was shut down for the rest of the season before it was trendy with the 76ers to be shut down for the rest of the season. I mean, he played 23 games, and we all watched the same thing. I mean, if you follow the story of Jared McCain last year, I'll never forget. He starts dropping 30-point games. He had two 30-point games, a 34-point game and a 30-point game last year. But I remember while he was riding this wave, I'm going back to the preseason. I'm going back to training camp. I'm going back to summer league even, where we noted during this past summer league that, hey, don't forget, Jared McCain didn't look so hot in summer league. But then you also think about what Nick Nurse said about him and what Daryl Morey said about him. And it went beyond tempering expectations, Keith. Like, for instance, when Daryl Morey just said, I need the Sixers fan base to be patient when it comes to VJ Edgecombe. He needs to be patient. Everyone be patient and all that stuff. Well, they weren't saying be patient with Jared McCain. They were saying he's going to be a G leaguer. He's going to be up some of the season, down some of the season. And then you see him play 23 games. You're like, this guy just keeps getting better and better and better. His shot selection from the outside is great. His shooting percentage from the outside is great. His free throw percentage was off the charts, like set rookie records and all that. It was unbelievable. And then all of a sudden it was just done. It was over. It was 23 games with the meniscus injury.
Yeah, it was really sad. I mean, but the funny part is, like, when we talk about it, you remember when they played Cleveland? It was on what was it? November the 13th. And it was one of those things where everybody was looking at it like, oh my God, they're playing the Cleveland Cavaliers. They got Jared McCain and they have nobody else playing, this and that. And the guy had 34 points on 12 for 26 shooting, right? 46.2%. He made 6 of 13 threes in that game. He also had 10 assists. So he had like a 34-10 game. To me, that was the game. Now, granted, he played some other games. The game right before that against the Knicks, he had 23 points. But this was a game where he started and he had 34. And then during that 5-game stretch, this guy scored average 26.6 points. From 3, he shot 48% in 5 consecutive starts. Now, he started, I believe it was 7 games in a row, but in those first 5 games, this guy was phenomenal. He shot from the field 51.1%. So to me, when you look at that and he can give that type of offense, and it was guys like Paul George who was basically giving the ball back to him. Like he would pass the ball to Paul. Paul would hit it back to him and he would drain a 3. Those are the things that the 76ers need from him. And I think that, he's a whole lot better than what we gave him credit for during the summer league.
Absolutely. And look, I'll just ask you this point blank. Do you think the Sixers were just setting the bar low to take pressure off of him? Or do you think the Sixers legit thought that this guy was going to be in the G League?
You know what? I felt, here's the thing. I do feel like they felt like he probably would have been maybe, spent some time in the G League, that he would basically have to work his way up through. Because when you look at it, let's think about it. They went out there and got a veteran team last year. They got a bunch of guys who were already experienced, guys who were on playoff caliber teams, guys who won championships. So when you look at Jared McCain, especially when you see how he played in the summer league, you have to say to yourself, it's going to be a couple years. Like he's not there. But you got to give credit for the work ethic, and you also got to give credit for him being a big-time player. And what I mean by that is when the lights came on, he produced. He didn't hide. He didn't run and hide. He was like, I'm going to take these shots, and I'm going to do what I have to do.
Mm-hmm. And that makes me believe that the Sixers really did think, G League player, and that'd probably be the best thing, because they did go with a veteran team. And then, as it happens with many athletes, opportunity knocked. You might not have been expecting it, but it knocked, and he answered the door. And man, when he came to the door, he was ready to play. Fearless is a word I'd use to describe like everything I ask of young athletes, even guys who are 20th, 21st, 22nd overall picks, whatever, late in the first round. You're looking at it and you're going, all right, well, what do you got? You're going to get an opportunity here sooner or later. Show me what you got. Certainly don't look like you're too small for the moment. There was never a moment, Keith, where he looked like he was too small. And then I also think about a guy coming out of Duke, and he's kind of got that aura over him or that mystique around him. Could guys from Duke really succeed and all that? And he just went out there and he played his game. And all of a sudden, this shooting, like I was used to seeing mid-range game from him at Duke. The 3-point percentage wasn't really going to jump off the screen to you and all that. But he expanded his game at the NBA level a lot faster than I would have expected a rookie to. He was doing stuff in his first couple of games that I would have expected to see maybe in games, 65, 70 in his NBA career. Now, he hasn't gotten to that point yet, but I'm just saying he was far ahead of the curve when he started playing basketball for the Sixers last year. Now, the other thing is I've been so pleasantly surprised, and thinking back to his season, I've been so pleasantly surprised by what he did through those 23 games. And no question, those 23 games, if you were to say that the rookie of the year was going to be named then, it would have been Jared McCain. But his handle looked better than I expected. His shooting percentage was obviously better than I expected. His free throw percentage was better. His awareness was obviously a lot better too than I expected. If you had to pick out one thing from Jared McCain to get better at in this offseason, what do you think that better thing is?
I think he has to do a better job of when guys have him on the top of the scouting report, he has to do a better job being able to get to his spots and get shots. Because as good as he looked, right, the final 8 games that he played in, and we talked about those 5 games when he became the starter, and then after that, he started the next 2 games, right? But, after those next 2, including this, the remaining 8 games, he only shot 29.5% from 3, right? And a lot of it had to do with the way teams were defending him. He had to maneuver it. Like, they was just like, look, we're going to let you get your shot. You know, we're going to let you do this. And then they started scheming him. So that's the one thing he has to improve on. And where we talked about his scoring average was 26, it was sliced in half to 13. You know, overall from the field, he shot 41.3%. You know, he averaged 2.3 turnovers during that stretch. So to me, it's just being able to fight through things. So let's keep it real. Like what happened was he was just so phenomenal early on to whereas teams had him figured out a little bit and then he looked like a rookie, right? At certain times. But even with that being said, you know, he had scoring games of 18, 15, 17, 24, you know, during that stretch. So, you know, he'll be fine, but this is just the learning curve that he has to go by, you know, teams just trying to stack up against him.
Yeah, it's that adjustment that you have to make when the league adjusts to you, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Here's one thing I do like about the upcoming season for Jared McCain. When you really think about it, his role is not going to change. I don't think. Like I don't think Quentin Grimes is going to get signed. He's probably going to get signed to the point where he's going to be a starter. Kelly Oubre is going to be in there. Paul George, obviously, all that. Regardless of Paul George or Joel Embiid, I don't see Jared McCain's role changing. His role, I think, is going to be the guy to come off the bench and be that spark plug. The guy to come off the bench and get you some points, some quick points and all that. Whether it's cutting through the lane, whether it's outside shots, whatever. He's just got to look at it as he's got to be, like you said, that Lou Williams type player for the 76ers and just be the guy to come off the bench that you could rely on to make sure that he can get you points. I don't see him changing at all as the season goes on with or without Joel Embiid and Paul George as far as what his responsibilities are going to be.